Hey team, and welcome to another video in our Astrological Magical Elections video series. Today we are going to talk about magical electional opportunities that we're going to be able to participate in between our Capricorn New Moon on December 23rd and our Cancer Full Moon on January 6th. And this is one of those times where it's good to be an astrological magician, where it's good to have this practice or this experience in this practice, because this is one of those times where we have a good amount of things to talk about and utilize it with. We've gone through some dry spells in the not too distant past, and now we get to see, our payoff for our patience, we'll say, which is really great because we would definitely hate to waste a good waxing moon like we have here. So when we're talking about waxing moon talismans, we're talking about all that good stuff that we get to do, like talismans that are made for gain and for growth and for developing and for moving forward. Whereas last time we talked, we worked from a more waning moon perspective, where we were getting rid of things, where we were making room for things, where we were sacrificing things in some way, trying to get rid of or pare down on things. So we always like to see some good opportunities to fill those voids left behind, those clean spaces that we made in our waning moon periods, with more positive, more helpful, more powerfully helpful waxing moon talismans, and that's what we have here today. So we have a good amount of elections to talk about, and this one is going to kind of be a little weird because we're just going to kind of talk about it day by day in a way. Hey, that rhymed. Where we're going to talk about each of the different talismans or elections themselves, kind of as our own individual slot instead of covering location by location. So our first electional opportunities that we're going to be able to pick up is going to be on Christmas Day, December 25th. And this is going to be an opportunity for a 24th Lunar Mansion talisman. This is only going to be available for Western Europe, North Africa, and Australia. So those of us in the North American continent are going to have to miss out on this one, unfortunately. And the 24th Lunar Mansion is probably the most powerfully positive waxing moon oriented talisman. So typically I kind of put talismans in, or I put lunar mansions in kind of specific groups. The most broad are those that are more waxing oriented and those that are more waning oriented. Not that you can't, necessarily work with some that are not in the camp in the right time. And so the 24th Lunar Mansion is one that is much more waxing oriented. It is inherently about multiplication, about increase, about fertility in many instances. And so these are ideas that you kind of want to carry forward with you when you're thinking about making this talisman. And with the 24th Lunar Mansion, I know that the card will say like the suffumigation is like bull's horn or ram's horn or something like that. And the basic idea here for those more new to who are less familiar with this Lunar Mansion is that whatever the sacrifice is, that's the thing that's going to multiply. So traditionally the idea was like, if you want to increase your cattle herd, you would use bull's horn, to carve the image of the talisman in. If you wanted to increase your sheep herd, then ram's horn, things like that. You typically, since it's more of like a prosperity building kind of thing, which is usually what you're tapping into whenever we see these conversations about agriculture or husbandry and livestock, it's really more of like a livelihood. Today we would think of it more of like a monetary kind of thing. So being able to increase one's income, I would just recommend grabbing some banknote and drawing the image on there, sacrifice the banknote to it. It's typically how you're going to go about it. So a really great talisman, very nice to have. And so for our Western Europe, North Africa version of this chart, what we're going to look at here is this one takes place on Christmas Day at around 3:15 in the morning. So, if you wake up too early, you might catch Santa putting Christmas presents under your tree. So that could be fun too. And in our election here, we have the moon down here, actually in the third house, while also being in the 24th Lunar Mansion. So typically, the third house is not a super awesome house for the moon to be in. It's a cadent house. A lot of times we would prefer the moon to be in the first or the 10th house and then the 11th house. But the third house is her house of joy, and I do like the moon being here in a lot of different lunar mansions. So it's a really great fallback for when our first three. It's a good number 4 place. It's a good 4th priority place when the 1st, 10th, and 11th are unavailable. I definitely prefer it to even like the 9th and the 5th. So keep that in mind if you're ever kind of planning your own Lunar Mansion talismans, which you definitely should do. But here we have the moon in the third house in the 24th Lunar Mansion. And at this time, she is applying this really helpful sextile to Jupiter in Aries. Jupiter is all about increase. It's all about, giving not just increase, not just multiplying things, but also providing like a stable environment wherein growth is possible. So definitely a really great talisman, or a really great energy to have behind a 24th Lunar Mansion talisman, because I feel like Jupiter kind of influences help things keep from getting a little too out of control, which we might see in like a more Mars or a more like energetic active kind of influence here. So the Jupiter, I think, is a really good one to have here, a little bit more moderating, and a little bit more moderating while also allowing the right amount of growth to come through, which can be very helpful. I would also really recommend this talisman because I don't normally read into talismans, into election charts this far, but I really do also enjoy the fact that Jupiter is in the 5th house and rules the 5th house in this chart. And so it could be really great for anybody who's looking to conceive and have a child. Just kind of like an added sort of symbolic oomph, we'll say, to this. Now, one thing to be careful of with this election is, we're talking about a really late Libra rising, and that's because we really want to maintain Venus as the ruler of the 1st house in this. This could also be another argument for it being used as like a conception or fertility kind of election. But we really want to keep Venus here because Venus is not combust. She's not afflicted by Mars or Saturn. She's not retrograde, so our typical things, she's on the 12th house, our typical things that we look to when we're trying to decide whether or not we want to keep a ruler of the 1st house aren't there, so that's good. But if we move it into like a Scorpio ascendant instead, if you're late and you get the Scorpio ascendant, that's not as great, because then you're going to be signified by this Mars retrograde in Gemini, sorry. And I don't like that. I don't like the ruler of the 1st house retrograde in talismanic elections, so that's my kind of my warning there, is make sure that you don't wait too long. Make sure you're able to maintain the Libra rising, because once you slip into the Scorpio rising, it's going to be a Mars rulership, which isn't quite on brand for what we're after. Now, the Australian version of this chart is also going to be December 25th, but for you guys, it's going to be just after noon, so 12:38 p.m. And we're seeing mostly the same stuff. It's just the chart has shifted to where the moon was in the 3rd house in the Western Europe North African chart. Now the moon's in the 11th house. So now can join the cusp of the 11th house. So now she's sort of in that number 3, that number 3 house priority, we'll say. And she is still maintaining the sextile to Jupiter in Aries. So we still have that very strong connection towards, the greater benefic planet, who's all about increase and stability and providing a stable environment for increase to occur. It's now in the 1st house instead of in the 5th house. So we kind of don't have as strongly here that fertility, pregnancy, conception kind of energy that we had in the Western Europe and North African chart. But now here it's more of like a 10th house and a 1st house kind of thing. So it's not going to be kind of as strongly aligned to that. It's going to be your kind of more general growth, maybe something that's a bit more like personal growth or things like that. And the ruler of the 1st house here is going to be the Jupiter in the 1st house. Jupiter in Aries is fine, unafflicted by Mars or Saturn, not combust, not retrograde. But we're going to kind of have that same little warning here where you want to maintain that late Pisces ascendant, because slipping into Aries will give you the Mars retrograde in Gemini, and we don't want that. So all in all, we have some great examples for some of us. I'm not jealous, for the 24th Lunar Mansion coming up on Christmas Day. So what a gift. What a gift from the universe. I guess if we're going to follow that analogy further, North America gets cold. So yay. Yes. So our second electional opportunity is going to take place on December 26th. And this is going to be for a Deneb Algedi fixed star talisman. This is going to be specifically for only North America and Western Europe, North Africa. So Australia, unfortunately, has to sit this one out. And Deneb Algedi is a fixed star, one of the 15 Bohemian fixed stars. That is the tail of the goatfish constellation, so the tail of Capricorn. And this is a star that is mostly associated with, we're going to say investment protection. The kind of the basic idea of Deneb Algedi is that it's very much like walls and fences. It is a fixed star that is very much focused on long-term wealth building. Kind of like the getting started, developing, or further ripening what we might refer to today as like generational wealth. So very useful for like investments, very useful for savings, very useful for real estate investments specifically, or for maintaining one's home or protecting one's home from various disasters, from various threats, whether that be human threats, like threats from like burglars, or threats from like natural disasters, or home, like intense home repairs, like burst pipe kind of things, foundation issues, construction concerns, things like that. Deneb Algedi is really helpful for kind of having that kind of protective veil on it. Deneb Algedi is also really useful for getting favor in lawsuits and like legal battles. So if any of that sounds like something you might be interested in, something you might need, Deneb Algedi is your friend here, potentially your friend. So for the North American version of this chart, Deneb Algedi will occur on December 26th at 10:25 a.m., so just a little bit before 10:30. And here we have the moon. Here we have the fixed star, the ascendant, conjoined the fixed star Deneb Algedi. Deneb Algedi's position is 23 degrees Aquarius and 31 minutes, and here we have why is it so hard to say? 23 degrees Aquarius and 27 minutes, so we're basically right there. And at the same time, we have the moon applying to the star. And also in the chart, her next immediate aspect is a conjunction with Saturn. Saturn is one of the planets that is said to be of the nature of the Deneb Algedi. It is of the nature of Jupiter and Mercury. Of Saturn and Mercury, not Jupiter. And so we would really want the moon. We need the moon to be in an aspect with one of those two planets. And here we have it conjoined Saturn. So check and check. At the same time, we're trying to avoid all of our normal things. The ruler of the first house, which is Saturn also in this, is not retrograde, is not square Saturn, is not combust the sun. The moon is not either because they're right on top of each other. The ascendant degree isn't because it's right on top of each other. And just all in all, we have a really nice kind of a thing here. And again, I typically don't read this far into elections, especially like fixed star elections, which are very kind of focused, like focused invocational, like rituals towards one specific spirit. But I do really enjoy Jupiter's proximity to like the second house cusp here. Like that's kind of neat, right? We can have fun with that. So that is the North American version of the chart. So the Western European and North African version of this chart also takes place on December 26th, but instead takes place at 16:12. So just like 4:15, close around 4:15. And here we have kind of that same chart, more or less, but now it's just on the midheaven. So now we've got Deneb Algedi at 23 degrees Aquarius on the midheaven here. The moon at 19 is applying the conjunction not only to the star, but also to Saturn, who is also on the midheaven at this time. And Saturn being one of the planets of the nature of Deneb Algedi, that all checks out. These planets are not afflicted by Mars. There's a trine aspect here, and that's fine. They're not too close to the sun to be combust, which is good. And then we look to make sure the ruler of the first house, who is Mercury here, can join Venus. That's great. The ascendant degree itself is not afflicted by anybody whose affliction is worth considering. So just another really great election for Deneb Algedi, another really good catch. Unfortunately, some of us, me, will not be able to make this Deneb Algedi talisman because I will be traveling back home from visiting family over Christmas. So if somebody out there listening could make me could make me a Deneb Algedi talisman while they're making their own, that would be pretty nice. I've been looking for a Deneb Algedi talisman for a long time, and I've never been able to get one to work. I've never been able to get a time to work for me, as you can see. And now it will be the one time I'm actually to find one. I will not, unless I can like make it in the car. That could be fun. That could be a fun experiment, right? Just to bring like a little printer in the car. I'm on it. I got this. So our next electional opportunity is actually going to be an Australian exclusive. So Australia did not get to participate in the Deneb Algedi fixed star talisman, but their chart that would almost have been a Deneb Algedi fixed star talisman can perform as a 26th Lunar Mansion talisman. So just to kind of give like a neat little thing here, if you remember in our last charts, like in the North American version of the Deneb Algedi chart, we had the moon. The moon was actually here at 19. I'll do my best to draw this at 19. Aquarius. Yeah, that's beautiful. Ooh, that's hard. That hurts me. The moon was at 19 degrees Aquarius, and so was applying to the conjunction of both the fixed star and to Jupiter. But here she's at 24 Aquarius, like you can see. And she's past the star. The star's at 23, so she's missed it. We're gone. So there is not a time in the Australian version of this chart where we could have the moon on an angle with the star, on an angle with the moon applying to the star. She would have to be separating, and that's not going to work for us. But what we can do is we can make lemonade out of lemons, I guess, and we can use this to create a 26 Lunar Mansion talisman. The 26th Lunar Mansion is a different flavor than Deneb Algedi, and that is that the 26th Lunar Mansion is one that is very much focused on relationships. Not necessarily just romantic relationships, but it can be. But really, we're talking more about like deep, personal, supportive, loving, unconditionally friendships, relationships, community. So if this sounds like something that you are interested in, whether it's helping you kind of create a deeper emotional or kind of like a deeper respectful connection with an existing partner, or to help you find one if you're currently looking for one, or to help you bring in better friendships, better, more supportive friendships, and like greater community, even trying to find your tribe kind of a thing, then the 26th Lunar Mansion can be super helpful to help you accomplish this. So looking at our election here, we have the moon conjoined the ascendant in the 26th Lunar Mansion, and she's applying this sextile to the sun. Of course, Ryan found another Lunar Mansion election with the moon conjoined, with the moon in an aspect with the sun. What a shock. Put that down on your bingo cards. But I really do enjoy this connection here. I also really enjoy that the sun is in the 11th house, the house of friendship and things that are good for the spirit and mind, which friendships and healthy social connections are those things. So I like that. So all in all, just really nice looking here. Saturn as the ruler of the first house in Aquarius is nice. Not retrograde, not combust, not afflicted by Saturn. So I do want to make a quick point here that somebody is probably thinking about. In my last video, I had a thing happen where sometimes I have what's called separation blindness, or what I call separation blindness, where I get so focused on what the moon is going to do that I forget to focus a little bit more on where the moon has been. So kind of like separating aspects of the moon I don't think about as often, and that gets me into trouble, where the moon may be having very closely recently separated from a malefic aspect, and maybe I should consider that. And so I bring that up to say, obviously you can kind of see that that's happening here with the moon only 3 degrees away from the conjunction with Saturn. So why is this okay when in the past, I think the last video was like the moon in a separating square with Mars? Why is this okay, but the Mars square from the previous video was not okay? And so the reason for that is because Saturn rules the first house in this election. And this is like a more long-standing kind of electional rule that you can take even when you're trying to figure out like more mundane elections. If the ruler of the first house is a malefic planet, then it's not really malefic in that instance. It performs as significator of the person, of you, or whoever's initiating action in magical elections. It's the person that is making the talisman, or for whom the talisman will perform. So this Saturn is not operating as a negative malefic Saturn. It's just operating as a stand-in for the person, perhaps the people who work with this, who decide to work with this, are Saturn figures in some way, and so there's like a sympathetic thing there. I can't really say how that's going to play out in 100% of cases, but just in case somebody was wondering why some separation why some separating aspects are okay and why some are not involving malefic planets, usually if the moon is ever in an aspect with a malefic planet that you're not super into, you can make it okay by making that malefic planet the ruler of the first house. So keep that in mind. Or alternatively, the ruler of the house of the thing that you're after. But we don't really look at charts that way in magical elections, like we would in more mundane elections. There's not really like another house that we're trying to there's not really like another house ruler that we're trying to incorporate into it. All right, so our fourth electional opportunity is going to be a universal one. So everybody, no matter where you are, ought to be able to participate in crafting this talisman if you so choose. This is going to be for a 28th Lunar Mansion talisman. The 28th Lunar Mansion's traditional use is for assistance in fishing. The idea is that you would carry this talisman, you would drop it into the water, and you would have an easier time catching fish around its vicinity. So on the one hand, if you are a commercial, competitive, or recreational fisher, then here you go. Like here's your new best friend. If you're not, that's okay. That's fine. You can still utilize this because a lot of times when we're talking about these kinds of more agricultural, um, hunting kind of talismans, what we're talking about primarily is like livelihood, right? And in today's society, that livelihood is primarily financial. Like your monetary your financial income dictates how much you can eat, right? Like what you can eat, things like that. And so that's kind of the similar vibe that we're going for. So how I like to use the 28th Lunar Mansion is I like to use it to draw in opportunity. And this can be really great for a bunch of different reasons. Oh, I know somebody who needs this. Please hold. So a lot of times I like to recommend the 28th Lunar Mansion for people who are looking for ways to like diversify income, create different income or revenue streams, who are looking for jobs, who maybe work, maybe already have a job or a profession, but maybe work more based off like commissions or orders or things like that. The idea is like the opportunities come together. The individual has an easier time kind of choosing what they want to pursue, which of those things do they want to say yes to, and moving forward from there. So overall, a really helpful talisman. It's also used to help control water, which I think is interesting too. So for individuals who are maybe in a particularly precarious situation with water, like their home is in a flood zone, or they have like a history of dealing with floods, or things like that, water issues. The 20th Lunar Mansion could be another way to address those too. But like I said, this is a universal election. Everybody should be able to utilize it. So let's talk about what this looks like. We're going to go ahead and start with Australia, where this opportunity takes place on December 29th at just after noon. So 12:03 is what this chart is set for. And here we have the moon conjoined the ascendant in the 28th Lunar Mansion. I forgot what we were talking about for a second. And at this time, she is applying the conjunction with Jupiter itself here in the first house. She's just recently separated from the sextile with Mercury, so I really wanted to hone in on the Moon-Jupiter conjunction here. Jupiter, again, kind of like we talked about with the 24th Lunar Mansion, Jupiter is a planet that's very much about like growth. That's very much about stability, creating an environment for growth to happen. Success, financial success, so things that support you and make you happy. So I really like this lunar connection. I like the idea of Jupiter. I think of Jupiter a lot when it comes to the 28th Lunar Mansion. I probably just because of like the whole fish imagery, right? And Jupiter ruler in Pisces. So like a Moon-Jupiter conjunction just feels really right being involved in this. At the same time, look to the ruler of the first house. That's this Jupiter here in Aries. Jupiter's not afflicted by Mars, not afflicted by Saturn. Not combust the sun. Jupiter's not retrograde. So all in all, everything checks out for what Australia would need to do. Oh, one thing though. Well, we'll talk about it here, but it applies to the last chart too. So the North American version of this chart takes place on December 28th at 11:25, so just a little bit before 11:30, and very much like basically the same setup as it was for the Australian version. Here we've got the moon conjoined the ascendant here in the 28th Lunar Mansion. She's applying this conjunction with Jupiter. We love that for Jupiter. We love this journey the moon is on in the 28th Lunar Mansion. The moon, the ascendant, and Jupiter are all free from afflictions with Mars, Saturn, or the sun. And what I forgot to say in the previous chart that is also true for this one is you want to make sure that you keep this Pisces ascendant. It shouldn't be a problem, but you want to make sure that you keep the Pisces ascendant going here. Because if you slip into an Aries ascendant, not only will you lose the moon's angularity, which is important, you don't want the moon to go into the 12th house, that's not fun, but you'll also lose Jupiter as a ruler of the first house, and you'll go to Mars, who's a retrograde, and that's never great, unless you're thinking about some way to incorporate that retrograde itself, like maybe one of the opportunities you go back to is something that you've done in the past, like some kind of retrograde going back thing would be appropriate, but generally we want to move forward and do new things. So I tend to recommend not doing retrograde planets. And then finally, for Western Europe and Northern Africa, the opportunity is going to take place on December 28th at around 17:35, so a little bit after 5:30 in the afternoon. And this chart is different in that we've taken that moon conjunction from the ascendant and we moved it up to the midheaven. So we still have the moon in the 28th Lunar Mansion. Now she's on the midheaven, which is fine. And she's applying still that conjunction to Jupiter. This chart could actually be a really good one for job concerns, like for career goals and things like that. So this might be this is probably the best one, just because this conjunction is happening in the 10th house, which is really nice for more like job, career specific concerns. So keep that in mind. The ascendant degree has obviously changed. Now we've moved to Cancer rather than Pisces. So instead of Jupiter as the ruler of the first house, it's the moon. But we still have a free, like a pretty clear shot at this. And what I mean by that is like, the ascendant's not afflicted by Saturn or Mars, got an opposition-ish from Venus, who cares? The moon isn't, the moon's still unafflicted by everything, but this new ascendant degree is not a problem because we don't have any afflictions from our typical afflicting characters. So everything here still looks really good. Our fourth electional opportunity is going to be for a first Lunar Mansion talisman, and this is going to be for North America and Western Europe only, unfortunately. The first Lunar Mansion is one that is very focused on energy and motivation and moving forward on things. So I like to use the first Lunar Mansion for people who feel like they're in a funk or in a rut, who feel like they're kind of going through the motions, or maybe they feel like they have suffered from being unable to talk themselves into doing something, have begun to see themselves procrastinating on accomplishing certain things, or just kind of generally avoiding things that they really don't want to mess with, or, kind of that thing. So the first Lunar Mansion is really great to help kind of give you that fire to move forward, that momentum to get started, and to help you overcome any kind of inertia that you may be experiencing when it comes to getting something done, getting things done. So all in all, a very helpful, a very forward-looking and motivating talisman for anybody who might feel like they could use that, which could probably all of us one time or another, yeah? So for our Western Europe version of this chart is going to take place on December 29th at 12:09 p.m. And this is, let me see. So this one is a fun one, just because the moon, we've solidified that Moon-Jupiter conjunction that we kind of first saw in the 28th Lunar Mansion chart, yeah? So we kind of maintained that conjunction, and now we've gotten to a really interesting spot where it takes place very close, where that conjunction takes place very closely to the ascendant, like almost exactly in the first degree of Aries, which is kind of fun. So the moon is in that first Lunar Mansion. She's conjoined the ascendant here. And she's applying to Jupiter. And Jupiter is a pretty even-keeled planet, I feel like, when it comes to energy and motivation. It's like, it's not such a forceful, let me see, how can I put this? It's not such a forceful injection of energy and momentum that you run the risk of burning out or not being able to follow through. It's a very even-paced kind of momentum, which can be very helpful for people who are kind of dealing with like a more longer-term issue, I guess we could say. Like a more longer term, being able to plan out and execute or allocate, maybe a better word, allocate energy for different things. So the Jupiter here, I think, is really, really great. Whereas obviously the connection or the, when you first think about the first Lunar Mansion, you probably think of it as a little bit more of a Mars-oriented mansion, and you would be right. It is. But Jupiter is like it kind of puts a lid on it to help it spread out a little bit more, help it be a little bit more long-term than Mars, which is probably going to be a little bit more short-term oriented. At the same time, you're going to watch out for that ascendant. You want to keep it at late Pisces, so you can maintain Jupiter as a ruler of the first house, because Jupiter and the moon and the ascendant degree are unafflicted, either by an aspect with Saturn, an aspect with Mars, combust the sun. Neither of the planets are retrograde because the moon can't be retrograde. But that's what you want to maintain, because if you have an Aries ascendant instead, if you miss this and you end up getting an Aries ascendant, then it'll be this retrograde Mars. And, obviously a retrograde planet is not going to be very effective in a talisman that is about moving forward. That's about giving us energy to move forward and complete tasks. Maybe the retrograde could be useful if it's tasks that you have to go back and redo. But that's a very kind of limited, it's just like a very limited application, and I would rather have a more general application where it's anything. So it doesn't matter. But I would really recommend going for a direct planet in this in these circumstances, and in most every. The North American version of this chart takes place on December 29th at 11:45 a.m. is what this chart is set for. And this chart is a little bit different from the Western European North African version, because as you can see in those charts, the moon was applying to Jupiter, and now she is separating from Jupiter. So here the moon is placed in the first Lunar Mansion on the ascendant, but instead of the Jupiter conjunction like we had her in the previous chart, like I said, it's now the square to the sun. So squares can be a little bit meh, They're not one of the more preferred aspects, obviously. That's more the conjunction, the sextile, and the trine. Those easier aspects, those more harmonious aspects. The square can sometimes be a little bit challenging, especially if it's with a planet that is a little bit more difficult. So I would never look at a talisman that had squares to like Jupiter or Saturn. I'm sorry, that had squares to Saturn or Mars in it, unless it was a particular flavor of talisman. But sun squares are not so bad. And it's bothering me that my candle lights are not in sync. So we'll just keep everything blue for Mercury's day today. So the sun square here is going to be a little bit different from the Jupiter square, where the sun square, from the Jupiter conjunction, because the two planets are different mostly. So Jupiter had that more even keeled, and I think the sun does too, but the sun is a little bit more forceful. It's a little bit more life-giving, and a little bit more animating. So I really prefer the sun aspect here. What a shock. Because I really think it helps kind of get to the crux of what might be somebody's issue that they're struggling with when it comes to accomplishing tasks or, feeling better about things and not procrastinating or putting things off as much, which I think can be very helpful. Of course, the sun also has signification of habit, of discipline. And so I think having that, especially like a Capricorn, like an earth sign, just feels really good. So really useful for helping to build habits and stuff like that. So this could be a great helping you to accomplish whatever New Year's resolution you set for yourself talisman. You show up all the time, and that's helpful and gives you kind of the strength that you need to continue move forward and make positive progress. That's going to be your sun connection there. So all in all, a really great election here. Same rules apply, or same concerns apply when it comes to the ascendant. Make sure it stays in Pisces. Don't want to go into Aries and grab that and pick up Mars, a signification of the first house. That's not going to help you out very much. So those were all the elections that we have for Western Europe. You guys are done. So have a good night, Western Europe. But Australia and North America still have a little bit more to go. I went back and forth a lot about this election for Australia. But on December 31st at 8:09 p.m., we have an opportunity for what might be a third Lunar Mansion talisman. The third Lunar Mansion is my absolute favorite Lunar Mansion. It is for the acquisition of all good things, and for success in magic and alchemical workings. So a really helpful talisman, generally helpful talisman, that can help individuals acquire what they need. It's just wondrously helpful talisman. Let's go ahead and dig into the election and why it's a maybe. So in this election, we have the moon just barely in the third lunar mansion. The third lunar mansion begins at 25 degrees Aries in 42 minutes, and here the moon is at 25 degrees Aries in 43 minutes. So literally just 1 minute of arc into this mansion. So that's so you have to make sure that you don't start too early because you might still be in the second lunar mansion. So make sure you double check that time if you're going to do this talisman. At the same time, the moon is applying a square to Venus here in Capricorn. I kind of talked a little bit about squares in the last one. They're not the best. They're not awesome like the sextile or the trines or the conjunctions are. But when it comes to connections with benefic, with life, with helpful planets, almost any connection is better than no connection at all, except for the opposition, which I maintain is a trash aspect. So even though we are connecting here with a square, because we're connecting with Venus, it's not bad. It's not terrible. It's just not as great as it could be. But Venus is a benefic planet who wants to give us good and helpful things, and so too is the third lunar mansion. So they get along. They have a similitude here, and we want to utilize that. We want to lean into that as much as we can. The moon also rules the first house, and she's here safely in Aries. She's not afflicted by Saturn. They're in a sextile aspect, and sextiles with malefics are fine. She's averse to Mars. She's not combust the sun. But where my maybe comes in here is this node connection here. So this is one of those things where the third lunar mansion is almost over for us. And what I mean by that is the other boundary for the third lunar mansion is at 8 degrees Taurus in 34 minutes. So once the node moves into 8 degrees of Taurus, we're not going to be able to really have third lunar mansion talismans for, 9 months-ish? More than that, probably, more like a year and a half-ish, while the node kind of maneuvers through this mansion. So this might be the last opportunity that Australia has to get a third Lunar Mansion talisman, but it's all going to hinge on how close you, like, it's all going to hinge on whether or not you think the moon being 15 degrees away from the node is a problem or not. And I think that's like super on the fence. I'm not sure that I would go through with it, even knowing how much I really enjoy the third Lunar Mansion. Just if it was 15 degrees separating from the node, now we're talking. But 15 degrees and applying to the node, that's a little iffy. But I know that other individuals are not as strict or sensitive to that stuff as I am. So I wanted to offer it as a potential third Lunar Mansion talisman for those who are feeling who are feeling feisty. And so those were all of our elections now for Australia. There's one election left, and it is a North American exclusive, and this is going to take place on January 4th at just after 9:30. This chart is set for 9:47, and this is going to be an opportunity for a Saturn planetary talisman. So our time with Saturn in Aquarius is coming to a close. I'm not sure when the very last Saturn talisman is. I guess I should figure that out. The very last Saturn in Aquarius talisman is before we have to wait until like Saturn in Libra. So, you know, like 20 years ish before we really start talking about Saturn talismans again. But I know we're getting close to the end. There's only 7-ish degrees left before Saturn moves into Pisces. And here we have all of our kind of classic signatures that we look for when we're looking to make planetary talismans for Saturn. So here in our election, we have Saturn on the ascendant. So Saturn very angular, Saturn in Aquarius is on its domicile. The moon is applying the trine to Saturn here, and it also takes place during Saturn's hour. So those are our 4 big things that we want. At the same time, we want to make sure that Saturn is not afflicted. Saturn's not retrograde. Mars isn't square it. It's not combust the sun. Let me think, what else? Saturn's not cadent, obviously, never. The ascendant is also unafflicted. The bringing back the separation blindness. The moon is conjoined-ish Mars here. They're 10 degrees apart. I think that's fine. I think that's far enough apart to not have to worry about it. But if that feels a little too close for you, I totally understand. I don't think it's a big deal. And I'm always happy to find planetary talismans when I can, because I know there are many people who are kind of just coming into astrological magic who are interested in acquiring a Saturn planetary talisman, and this is like not a good time. This is not a good time to be coming in interested in making a Saturn planetary talisman, because I know that like one's own initial excitement for having them combined with the idea of the time for Saturn talismans running out, may encourage people to take risks that they probably shouldn't when creating them. But you know, it is a very true fact to say that our time with Saturn in Aquarius is running out. So if you're an individual who feels like they might want to go forward with a Saturn talisman, this could be a really great opportunity for those of us in North America. But all right, everybody, thank you guys so much for being here. I'm a little surprised that none of the cats showed up. Ty was here very shortly in the beginning, but then she wanted out. Everybody, it's very strange that nobody came, so I apologize on their behalf. Again, they're making me work by myself. But thank you guys so much for being here and for watching. Hopefully there was an election here or a talisman here that sparks your interest, an election that you'll be able to do based on your schedule, unlike me and my quest for the Deneb Algedi talisman that continues to slip through my fingers. A special shout out to all of my patrons. Thank you guys for your support. Really appreciate it. The cats and I do. If you're interested in supporting the channel, take a look at the Patreon page and all the fun special bonuses that it offers, whether that's a 6-hour-long introductory course on astrological magic, book clubs, guest speakers, community building office hours, free talismanic gifts, all kinds of stuff. Go and check it out. But thank you all so much for being here. I hope you all have a wonderful holiday season. Happy holidays and Happy New Year. I won't see you guys again until 2023, when we will be here talking about the Cancer full moon.